Hey everybody, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth.
On Now You Know.
You can help support our channel by heading over to ecoware.us, where you'll find new designs every week, and we carbon offset the production, shipping, and life cycle of every product, and we plant a tree for every order. This episode of Tesla Time News is sponsored by Skillshare.
Skillshare offers thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people on topics including design, photography, video editing, freelancing, and more.
I've been taking this class called Productivity Habits That Stick by Mike Vardy.
So what have you learned?
Well, I've learned how to create a framework to keep my attention to tasks during the week.
And I mean, I know that you're already into this productivity stuff, so have you been looking into classes like this before?
Actually, I haven't had time.
So then how did you have time to find this class?
Well, Skillshare is curated, which means that there's only good content on there. So I found this class in like 10 seconds, and it's divided into 8 bite-sized sections. So when I inevitably get called away, I could easily come back and pick up where I left off.
And Skillshare is affordable. It's less than $10 a month with an annual subscription.
And we're grateful to Skillshare because they're offering a 2-month free trial of Skillshare Premium membership to the first 1,000 people to use this link in the description below.
And we're brought to you by abetterrouteplanner.com. Do you want to get from A to B to C in an electric car? You should use abetterrouteplanner.com. It is a trip planning tool for all EVs that allows you to plan your route before you leave and even while you're on your route to see how you're doing. Click the link down below to check out abetterrouteplanner.com's premium version. Get a 30-day free trial.
And we're sponsored by our friends at the solar-powered hotels in Schaumburg, Illinois, the Fairfield Inn and Suites by Marriott and the Town Place Suite Hotel right next door. They're both connected, they're both solar-powered, and they both have EV charging. All right, so we're going to unpack what happened on Battery Day. We're going to do it in 3 chapters. Chapter 1 is going to be a quick recap of the important things revealed. And remember, there were a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 2 is going to be what does this mean for Tesla, for the auto industry, and for you.
And in Chapter 3, we're going to revisit the Osborne effect and why Battery Day is bigger than Elon let on.
All right, so Drew Baglino, who is the Senior Vice President of Powertrain and Batteries at Tesla, he's been with Tesla since 2006. He was on stage with Elon following the shareholder meeting, which was held kind of like a drive-in movie.
Yeah, if you didn't know what you were looking at, it would kind of look like the worst traffic jam in history, complete with beeping and everything.
And this is where the shareholder guests who got in by lottery were socially distanced in their Teslas.
Yeah, and they were socially distant in their cars. Very creative way for Tesla to do this. It's funny that we haven't seen other auto manufacturers do this for their investor days. Normally, they're not this exciting.
Because they'd have to have their ICE cars just
sitting there idling.
Yeah.
So anyway, please. Oh, I'm going to pass out.
And so Elon and Drew started the presentation about why Tesla is doing this at all. Why are they innovating?
So they pointed to the CO2 levels in our atmosphere. They're skyrocketing, and we have to transition to sustainable energy in order to support life on this planet as we know it.
And I just want to point out, this is different than any other company you ever hear about, because instead of saying, we're doing this to make more money.
Right. They're talking directly to their shareholders are sitting right in front of them. And instead of saying, we're doing it for you guys, you shareholders. You give us money, we give you money. Money, money, money makes the world go round. They're going, yeah, the world might keep on spinning, but we might not be on it any longer. Or at least we won't have such a wonderful civilization that we do now. So that is really cool that during Investor Day, they're not like, we're seeing how we can squeeze as much every little penny to give back to our shareholders.
They pointed out that the trend is reversing, but that we need to accelerate that trend. So they pointed out that in the US, 32 gigawatts of wind and solar capacity have been added this year. That's 76% of new power capacity. And to give you some idea about how the grid is getting greener, in 2010, 46% of the US electricity generation was made by coal.
Today, it's only 23%. But again, Elon talked about how we need to accelerate this, how we can't just be like, oh, we did a good job. Let's sit on our laurels and not do anything.
And Elon showed how Tesla has been contributing.
I think that it's pretty self-evident that Tesla has not only made a bunch of EVs, but has also forced a lot of traditional auto manufacturers to start producing electric cars. And we're just starting to see the boons of that this year, pretty much. We're seeing the ID3, we're seeing, well, the Mach-E isn't out yet, but we're seeing the Taycan, as well as lots of other manufacturers producing EVs. I don't think that this would have happened without Tesla. And that isn't even on that slide.
All right, so as Elon said, Tera is the new Giga. And I thought it'd be important to point out what that actually means. A terawatt equals 1,000 times a gigawatt.
And that's 3 orders of magnitude in Elon speak.
So this is a really important slide here for 2 reasons. Number 1, it shows that we need 100 times growth in battery production from where we are today if we want to hit Elon's goals. And number 2, look on the left there. What does that say?
Oh, it just says small / robotaxi, and then it just shows a sheet. So some kind of flying carpet.
Just remember that for later. That's important. So the problem, number 1 here, is that today's factories cannot scale fast enough to get to his goal. We would need, for instance, 135 gigafactories just to get to this goal. And we'll be discussing how Tesla plans to solve this problem in a little bit later on.
Goal number 2 is that they needed more affordable cells. Drew and Elon pointed out that the price curve is flattening. So as you can see from this graph, the predictions don't show a massive decrease in price as we've seen in the past. It's sort of plateauing.
Yeah, why is that?
Well, we often see these sort of rapid growths and then plateaus. It's generally based on the system of something. If you have some system of making something, you can make improvements to that system. And so therefore you can make massive strides in how you're going to produce something. But once you've basically maxed out all the efficiencies of that system, that is where you start to plateau, and you need to jump to a completely different system of manufacturing. And again, we're going to get to that a little bit later.
All right, so Tesla showed this 5-point plan here. So challenge number 1 is cell design. Tesla had to come up with a better cell. And what did they come up with?
A bigger battery.
Yep. So
literally bigger.
We talked about this in our in-depth. It's kind of what you predicted in terms of size. So if it was as simple as making one big battery cell, why didn't they just do this years ago?
Well, there are a couple of technologies that we're going to get into in a minute that were really, really necessary in order to make a bigger battery cell. So the first and most important is the tabless design.
Oh, right. This is the patent that Tesla came up with that we saw months ago.
Yes.
That basically allows you to get the electron out of this roll faster by just going straight out the top instead of having to go around and around and around the roll.
So they first showed us a video of their original 2170 battery unrolling. You see one tab on the top, one tab on the bottom. This is how you charge and discharge the cell. You attach to those 2 tabs, and that is what allows you to charge it. But if you are an electron on the very far end of one of the sides of the jelly roll, you have to travel all the way down the jelly roll and then through the tab.
And you heat up the pack the whole way.
Exactly. So if you were to make this large cell the same way with this one tab sticking out of both ends, you would have a lot of thermal problems. You wouldn't be able to charge it or discharge it that quickly. It would work, but like you couldn't do what you wanted to do with it just because it would overheat and damage itself. So this is where the tabless design comes in. Basically, any electron can leave the cell just through the top or the bottom at any time. And so that's where we get this beautiful image of the top of the cell. So you can kind of say that it's not tabless per se, but that it is
more tabbed.
It's so tabbed
it's
that you wouldn't even call it a tab.
But this looks really familiar for some reason.
Yeah, this is actually what was on the t-shirts that the people were wearing, and it was also what was on the invitation. Everyone thought that it was the silicon nanowire anode. Not that. It was actually a zoomed in picture of this.
So it was a giveaway, but we just didn't know what it was.
Exactly.
Interesting. And I just want to say a big kudos to you because you got the size almost perfectly right. We had reported that we thought it was a 4576 by your calculations.
Turns out it was a 4680. So I was off by 1 millimeter in diameter and 4 millimeters in height.
Wow.
It's pretty close.
Yeah, really close. And so this is what the cell looks like. And so what does this mean?
So there would be a 5 times increase in the amount of energy in this battery cell. Now, you might be saying, oh my gosh, Tesla cars are now going to have 5 times as much energy in them. No, it's per cell, and the cell is bigger. But there will be a 16% increase in range. Just from this one thing. The cell increase, and it has 6 times the power of a 2170.
So we had conjectured that it could have as high as 96 amps. It appears we're wrong. So if the old cell was 6 amps, and this is 6 times that, it appears that it would have a 36 amp capacity.
For continuous stuff. You can obviously peak, even regular old 18650s, you can peak over 20 amps. continuous draw with like no problems at all, you could probably do 36 if we're comparing it to the 2170s. I'm not sure exactly what the amp hour capacity is of this battery. We're going to learn that probably as soon as they start coming out.
And the cool thing is they're producing these right now at the Cato Road facility down the street, and they're making them in volume. Drew said that they have actually made tens of thousands of these already at a rate of 10 gigawatt hours per year.
Compare this to Giga Nevada, which makes 35 gigawatt hours per year.
And think of the size of Gigafactory Nevada compared to the Cato Road facility, which is kind of tiny.
Right. So this basically means that they have a working pilot production line that they can replicate, because you can just go out and buy the parts or remake it and multiply it as many times as they want to. That is something that they could have stopped the presentation right here and said, and there you go. Yeah. And they could have left. And we should have all been pretty impressed by that, because that is impressive. To not only have made this cell with those specs, but also to have the pilot line ready to go that you can then duplicate in your factories.
Right, because this is a 14% reduction to the price per kilowatt hour. So if they had just come out and mic dropped after this, it would have been like, whoa, you already got a 14% cost reduction?
Right, but that's not all.
Yeah, let's move on to number 2, which is the cell factory. So up until this point, they've been using an electrode wet process, which uses a huge amount of space, energy, and time to make a battery.
Now they're switching to a dry electrode. And the cool part about this is you don't need to deal with liquids. If you have ever tried to boil water before, you know that you can't just boil water. Like, it doesn't work like that. So dealing with any kind of liquid is kind of a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
So that by eliminating this, they have a 10 times footprint reduction, which means that they don't have to worry about wetting, mixing, or drying any of this wet electrode.
Which kind of points to why the Cato Road facility is so much smaller than we'd expect.
Exactly. And it has a 10 times energy reduction, because you don't need to be drying stuff, which obviously takes a lot of energy.
And so what they showed here that they're going to is a high-speed continuous motion assembly. Nothing ever stops. I want you to think about this for a second. When I think of a factory, I think of this.
Right. It's slow.
Slow.
Right, we get it. Yeah.
Their factory, though, is showing that nothing ever stops. As Elon said, conveyance does not count as useful work. What does he mean by that?
Just because you're moving something over to a machine that's going to do work on it, that doesn't really count. So you want everything to be both conveying and doing work at the same time. You don't want them to just be like, okay, here you go, Bob. Fill it up, Bob. Okay, thanks, Bob. Okay, moving it on to the next station. No, you want it to be like, it's moving and it's pouring, and then we're going off to the next thing.
Yeah, Elon doesn't want any waste of space. So this new cell factory line will be able to produce 20 gigawatt hours a year, and it's 7 times the line output at 86% formation investment reduction and 75% formation footprint reduction. So we've now dropped to 32% of the dollar per kilowatt hours. What a savings we already have.
This is a huge deal. And again, they could have mic drop. They could have said, and that's battery day, 32% reduction in battery cost per kilowatt hour, which is the thing that you care about.
Right.
That's amazing.
But we're not done.
But we're not done yet.
So let's talk about the anode material. As Drew said, silicon is awesome and inexpensive, but the challenge has been that when you put silicon into a battery, it expands by 4 times every time you charge up the battery, and so therefore it cracks.
Right. This leads to a problem, because then your battery cell degrades very quickly, which is not something that you want in a battery that you want to use again and again and again.
But what's awesome about silicon is that it's super cheap. It's dirt cheap, because it basically is sand.
Right.
And so they've come up with an elastic ion conducting polymer coating. I don't know what that is. I don't know how they did it, but this basically increases the range by 20% with just this one improvement.
Right. So first they actually stabilize really tiny particles of silicon, and then they put it into an elastic binder that can both transmit electricity through it, but also expand and contract with the material itself.
Again, this could have been all they had to say at Battery Day, and mic dropped again, and it would have been amazing.
Right. So 20% increase in range. That is huge.
Yeah.
And on top of that, we're now up to a 37% reduction in dollars per kilowatt hour.
And let's not forget the cathode. Right now, Tesla has nickel-based cathodes, which are expensive, but very energy dense, and iron-based cathodes, which are less energy dense, but cheaper.
And they talked how they were working through new ways to create battery cathodes with nickel without having to use cobalt.
Yeah, that's huge in itself.
Because if these batteries could be cobalt free, it means that we can finally get away from this sort of blood diamond discussion where there's like a lot of human rights concerns about producing batteries because, maybe they contain cobalt. So by getting rid of cobalt entirely out of the battery, we don't have to worry about that anymore. Then you have nickel, which isn't as expensive as cobalt, which is great, and it gets you great energy density. So that's like an obvious choice for most batteries, but we have a limited supply of nickel. So even though it's not that expensive and is great for battery manufacturing, we actually don't have enough nickel being produced in the world. Not that there isn't enough nickel in the world, but there isn't enough being produced at the moment to keep up with demand. So Tesla is diversifying their cathodes. They're looking to iron, which is even cheaper but less effective as a battery, to be used in some of their products that don't necessarily need the highest ranges.
Yeah, lithium iron sulfate is great choice for grid storage, where you don't need to worry about how light it is. And also a surprise to see here in this graphic that they seem to be wanting to put it into the Model 3.
So we know that they're already doing this in China. They have the iron batteries in those. But it's funny that they also have the Model Y on the other side of that with the nickel batteries, and then high nickel density batteries for the semi-truck and the Cybertruck. I kind of wasn't expecting to see the Cybertruck with the semi-truck. I thought it would be back with the Model S and X. So that's interesting. And again, we get this glimpse of this covered car in the iron battery category, which would be the, whatever you want to call it, the Model 2 or the Model A, and the / robotaxi.
Yeah, we'll get to that. And so then they discussed how they can save by processing the cathode in a novel way. Basically, they're able to take raw metal nickel powder and mine it and process it cheaper than they were before, and they get a 12% savings. So now we're up to 49% cheaper dollar per kilowatt hour to make a battery.
And again, drop the mic, 50% cheaper batteries? Are you freaking kidding me?
What's really cool here is that they mentioned that with a simpler mining of lithium and nickel, it also makes for simpler recycling. So they didn't mention redwood materials, which I kind of thought they would in this presentation, but I think it's through a partnership with them that they're able to bring this in-house, because they mentioned that going forward, as you can see here from this graph, there's going to be more and more batteries that need to be recycled as we get more and more cars. And so they're going to in-house start recycling them, because look at this graphic here. It's cheaper to take the materials out of a battery that you just made than to go mine them.
Right, because, why have to pick through dirt and rocks and twigs and stuff if you're mining it? Why not just take old batteries, rip them apart? All the stuff that we need for batteries right here because we're making a battery.
And they explain that they're using a new process involving table salt, sodium chloride, that they can extract lithium cheaply from clays.
Yeah, and there's 10,000 acres right in Nevada that has enough lithium in the clays there to supply all of the U.S. battery needs.
Yeah, so again, they just developed a new way to get lithium that they said no one else had ever come up with.
And this kind of puts an end to that argument that your old Uncle Joe is going to say, like, they're getting all the stuff from China or Saudi Arabia or wherever I don't like. No longer the case, unless your uncle doesn't like Nevada.
All right, so let's go to the next step, battery integration. All right, so we've showed you the GigaPress before, but now we get to actually show it to you in action. Check this out.
Now, I just want to say, this is not how any car manufacturer produces any large part of a car at all. This is a completely new process. Sure, there are castings, but none of this size and magnitude. And what this means is that you can reduce the cost of the Model Y's rear underbody casting by 40%.
Yeah, with 79 fewer parts per car. And they're going to be able to do this with the front body casting as well.
And they also talked about having a structural battery pack, which further lowers mass by 10% and increases range by 14%.
This means that you don't have to make modules and packs. You actually just put the batteries into a structural thing that it's all one unit, and that becomes the structure, which is a lot like an airplane wing.
Exactly. And Elon was saying even in a Formula One car where you'd have two pieces of carbon fiber with like an aluminum honeycomb, which gives it really, really good strength, you're doing the same thing here, but with the batteries of the car. So it's no longer just air, it's actual batteries that you need in your car are now a part of the frame of the car.
Yeah.
It's a really, really smart process, and it's going to eliminate 370 parts from your car. Now you might be saying, 370 parts, blah, 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 whatever. No. Take any one part. Think of a bolt. It's just a bolt. I don't care. When you're manufacturing something, it's not just a bolt. It means that there needs to be a machine that makes bolts somewhere. And you need a guy to go run it every day. And then that guy needs to put all the bolts in a big bucket and send them to you. And then you need to have a space in your factory for those bolts to go. Then you need someone to go over, get the bolts, put it into the machine, you dump it in, however you do it. You need to worry about all of that for every single part. So by eliminating 370 parts from that, imagine the savings, and you just go right into the cast. It's all set. That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, that could have been another mic drop moment.
Exactly.
But this also means you get a 55% reduction in investment per gigawatt hour and a 35% reduction in floor space. So this gives you an additional 7% reduction in the dollars per kilowatt hour. So this means that we get a grand total of a 56% reduction in the dollar per kilowatt hour. And I mean, yes, they could have just stopped right there, dropped the mic and said, see, we're going to have the best, cheapest batteries. Goodbye. Good night.
But then they popped up this slide here, which shows that not only are you getting 56% cheaper batteries per kilowatt hour, you also get 54% increase in range, and it's 69% cheaper to produce all of these batteries because you don't need to have that much cost in an investment to make all of the factories and stuff like that. So this is huge. I mean, if you combine these together, I get 50% more range. I get 50% cheaper car. I think that I get a free car, right?
It's not that simple. We're going to talk about this in chapter 3.
Okay.
Well, let's go to the end of the presentation where Elon presented this.
So with all of these advancements that Tesla has, they think that they can produce this smaller electric car. Now, Elon said 3 years from now, so that would put us at Q3 of 2023. That would cost $25,000. Let's call it the Model 2 for now. This could be hugely transformational. And we're going to talk about that more in chapter 2. But they weren't done.
Nope.
Model 2 wasn't the only thing that they unveiled.
No, in fact, Elon was so excited he just wanted to start talking about this, which is the Plaid Model S. And so this will have a range of 520 miles. It'll be 0 to 60 of less than 2 seconds, a quarter mile speed of less than 9 seconds. It'll have 1,100 horsepower.
And a starting price of $139,990. So $140K. Not cheap, but really, really fantastic specs.
And you can order it right now. It'll be available in late 2021. And so Elon talked about how it got an impressive track speed at Laguna Seca of 1 minute 30 seconds, which is better than any other electric car to date.
Right.
I think this was a smackdown of the Lucid Air, which had just accomplished a track speed of 133.
Yep. And that had happened just like 2 weeks ago. So they clearly just went out and redid their lap time in order to get a better lap time with the Plaid Model S.
But then Toby said, so if Model S Plaid has all the specs of Roadster would have, what would be the incentive to buy a Roadster? I'm just really curious here.
And Elon said Roadster will be better. Now, remember that the Roadster was announced in 2018. Pretty much 2 years ago. And the specs for that were pretty close to what we were seeing here. So you might be saying, yeah, oh gosh, who wants a Roadster anymore? If I can just get the Plaid Model S, it's going to be much cheaper than the Roadster and it'll have basically the same specs. I don't think that the Roadster is actually going to have the specs that they announced in 2018. I think it's going to have better specs.
Oh, definitely. And I think this goes back to our Osborne effect, which we'll talk about in chapter 3. But it is a dramatic smackdown for its competition. Take a look here. You see here that the Plaid Model S is definitely better than its competition.
Yeah, I mean, we have the Lucid Air, which costs $169,000. We have the Taycan, which costs $185,000. And neither of those two can touch the Plaid in terms of specs. Now, of course, the Taycan is already out, and the Lucid is soon on the way, but the price per pound of performance, I think you would have to argue, would be given to the Model S Plaid.
All right, so it's time for chapter 2, where we're going to tell you some of the effects this is going to have on Tesla, the industry, and you. So one of the first big takeaways I get from Battery Day is regarding mining. As Drew and Elon said, they have both been in talks with mining companies to let them know that they should start investing in mining more nickel and graphite. And for those of us looking for investment plays, and this is a plug here for our new monthly Patreon investor club at the $10 level, where we get together and we talk about all things investing. This is definitely something that we're going to be talking about, especially in terms of Nouveau Monde graphite.
Why does Nouveau Monde sound so familiar?
Well, you remember we interviewed their CEO, Eric Desaulniers. They are a sustainably powered graphite mine in Canada.
Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon. Go NASA, go.
Hey Elon, I know you're busy changing the world. I just wanted to thank you for being so successful at accelerating transitions to sustainable energy. Although the world momentarily paused to fight the invisible enemy, we both know the EV revolution hasn't slowed down.
And we made it our duty at Nouveau Monde Graphite to keep it up with the Western world grows and the EV market.
Now that you have terafactories in mind, we figured we better up our game. We're now producing spherical graphite, at first outside China, and we're weeks away from launching our purification operation, leveraging Quebec's clean and renewable hydropower to provide you with carbon-neutral material.
Lab test came back, boss, and looked like our unique thermochemical process is the So, if you excuse me, guys, we don't have time for this. I got 2,500 gigawatt of battery production in the pipeline. So, leave me alone.
So we have a special offer just for you. We'll trade our graphite for your semi-trucks. And if you can throw in a few superchargers to power up our all-electric mine, I think we have a deal. So from our mining and transformation operation to your battery plant and back to us, that's called circular economy, my friend. Now, I'm no Jordan, but our battery material will be scoring points.
Got it, baby. All right, gang. Ugh. Time to put the pedal to the metal. We got a Terra customer waiting for a shipment. Chop, chop. Come on.
Good job, Rick.
Yeah. Hey, salute. Who am I?
Looks like Europe is now full throttle on the EV revolution. Désolé, guten Tag.
Oh yeah, that was really awesome.
Yeah.
They always make such good videos, and they also make such good graphite, I hear.
Yeah, because what is Tesla talking about? The fact that there needs to be tons more materials to go into batteries, and one of the big materials you need is graphite. So that's one takeaway I have, is that there's a lot of mining companies out there that are going to be very busy. The second is to do with cell production.
So in the presentation, Tesla outlined the plan, and that was to hopefully get to 3 terawatt hours of production per year by the year 2030. Now, to me, it sounds kind of low with all the stuff that they've already told us about. In order to get 3 terawatt hours per year, they would only need to make 3 terafactories. And for 10 years, I feel like they could make all 20 if they really needed to in 10 years with the capital investments that we've seen, with the reductions in price that we've seen in those battery lines. It sounds all doable to me. I don't see why they would limit themselves to 3 terawatt hours.
I agree with you. I think that Tesla is lowering expectations to keep Cattle, Panasonic, and LG Chem from ganging up on Tesla.
How would they gang up on Tesla? They make batteries for them.
Well, if Tesla came out and said, hey, we're going to be able to make enough batteries to supply everything we need, then I think the other battery suppliers would get together and go, oh, crap, we got to start supplying the other companies because Tesla's going to drop us.
Oh, so like right now, Panasonic provides most of the batteries that Tesla uses in all of their cars, and so does Cattle and LG Chem. So if they, kind of came together and were like, hey, we should really stop supplying batteries to Tesla because they're actually going to compete with us pretty soon and put all the other car companies out of business, which means that they're going to put us out of business, that would be bad for Tesla because right now they could say, no more batteries for you.
Exactly.
And Tesla as a company would fall apart because they wouldn't be able to produce any cars.
So I think Tesla's taking the opposite approach, which is kind of similar to what Apple did with Intel, which is saying, hey, you can license from us this new great technology, which will help all of you, right? We can give it to you either free or really cheap in exchange for a guaranteed supply of cells. So if you're LG Chem or Panasonic, you go, oh, great, awesome. We get this new tech, and all we have to do is promise Tesla that we'll give them what they want.
And so that's why this slide might actually be misleading.
I think so.
Tesla might have in the plans that they would do 3 terawatt hours and that they would buy their cells from, Panasonic or LG Chem or Cattle. But I think that they probably were intending to do all 20 terawatt hours themselves by 2030.
Yeah, and I think this tweet backs up my conjecture. Holmar's catalog says if battery production is going to scale 55 times in 10 years, that means on average we'll see a 49% increase in production output every year this decade. Holy cow. And Elon says that's about right. Maybe a little faster.
Interesting. Some reassuring pats on the head of these manufacturers before they kill them later on, huh?
Could be. Then I want to talk about this. We all remember that the Model 3 was a game changer, right? It was going from, we had the Model S and X that were very expensive luxury cars that not many people could afford. The Model 3 was this, game changer for Tesla. It was getting a somewhat more affordable, amazing spec EV into the hands of hundreds of thousands of people. So this new model, let's call it the Model 2, which they said, is going to come out in 2023 for $25,000, will be an affordable car. And in fact, it'll be affordable to 8 times more people than the Model 3.
And we're talking 8 times more affordable than the base Model 3.
Right.
Because every time you reduce the price of a car by $5,000, you increase the potential customer base by 2 times.
Right.
So if you reduce it by $10,000, you open it up to 8 times more people.
Because remember, this doesn't just have to be a sedan. It could be configured as a small crossover or a robo-taxi, making it work for millions of people. And this car will sell millions of units. And then I just want to point out this one slide here that Elon rushed through because he was so excited to get to his Plaid Model S. It says, and extreme performance and range. So he's not offering you a piece of crap car for $25,000. This car is probably going to have something like a 300-mile range.
Right. You have to keep in mind that when the Model 3 was coming out, the expectations were actually very low for it. People were looking at the Model S, and then they were looking at the Model 3 underneath the sheet, and they were saying, it's probably not going to look as good. It's probably not going to have anywhere close to the specs of the Model S. And then it came out, and we were all like, did they just make a cheaper Model S? And I think that might be what we see with this Model 2 coming out. It might have very similar performance specs to the Model 3. It might be just a little bit less, flashy and beautiful than the Model 3. And we might go, oh my goodness, who would buy a Model 3 now? Of course, everyone's going to buy the Model 2.
Next, I want to talk about how this presentation basically showed that it's game over for Big Auto. So we've talked about this chewing off of the leg before, right? If you're stuck in the forest in a bear trap, you kind of have 2 choices. You can either sit there and bleed to death, or you can chew off your leg and try and hobble your way out of the forest. Well, what Elon just did here was he made the forest bigger.
Did he make the forest bigger, or did he make the clamp tighter? One of the two.
One of the two.
Big Auto is in trouble. There is less and less runway for them to switch. They don't have this luxury of switching to EVs faster because as Tesla makes it more and more affordable to switch to an EV, which is already the better choice in my opinion, and we've already proven this, butts in seats. As soon as someone gets in a Tesla, they don't want to get out of it.
So Big Auto either has to follow Tesla's playbook, which they kind of revealed a few pages of on Battery Day, or they're truly gone. And Tesla was already moving fast, but now they just sped up again.
Right.
This is so much innovation announced here. They basically are simplifying processes, going back to first principles that I'm thinking traditional auto manufacturers can't catch up. They're dead. They just don't know it yet.
Right. Because Tesla has actually been the one pushing these innovations of the systems of manufacturing the cells themselves. It's not like they're subbing out to Panasonic to produce cells better and more efficiently. Tesla is doing that work. So Tesla owns that. That is not just something that is out there in the world to be bought. That is something that Tesla has. And Tesla has the engineers and the minds to actually do that, whereas all of these other manufacturers have always just been like, yeah, we'll buy that part from here, we'll buy this part from here, but we'll just make the engines. Tesla doesn't do that. They are a completely vertically integrated company.
Yeah, and as James Stephenson says, this was the most important slide in the deck for Tesla's investors. This is Elon's hardcore smackdown to anyone who still thinks EVs can't be profitable. And Elon said,
yes.
Yes. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is Tesla's stock price. As we witnessed during Battery Day, we were watching the after-hours stock price, and we saw that it was tumbling. And on Wednesday, we saw the stock price take a hit as well. And this is for 2 reasons. The first is the mass media news articles that came out. Check these out. By and large, very negative. I think this was because things that were expected to be talked about, like the million-mile battery, weren't explicitly announced. And we didn't get to see like a car on stage,
right,
which I think the mass media would have liked because they could have shown a picture of Elon with the car and then they could have talked about it. They didn't have that. So I think mass media had a lot to do with it, but I also think that a lot of things were baked into the Tesla stock price thinking that they would be released on Battery Day because we had so many months to talk about it.
Right. This was originally supposed to happen pretty much almost exactly 6 months ago. And we've been sitting around for 6 months talking about like, oh, gee, I wonder what's going to happen on Battery Day. And when we've just like allowed our imaginations to run wild with like, oh, I bet they'll have a flying car, and oh, I bet that they're going to unveil they're going to drive up the Model 2 on stage, and then they'll have the Plaid also drive up on stage, and then they're going to have V to G, and then they're going to have batteries that are solid state, and then we're going to have batteries that can fly, and then it's going to be lasers.
A lot of this is because Elon has, I think, overhyped it a bit. He talked about this being like alien technology,
right, and
this being mind-blowing. Right. And I think when most of us hear those things, we think in terms of shiny.
That's true. And not that those cells weren't shiny, but...
Well, he didn't even have them on stage. And again, I think the market completely missed it. We saw that on Autonomy Day, where the market didn't understand that. And I think they didn't understand this. And so, to prove my point, let's take this tweet. From James again, Tesla has averaged 50% revenue growth per year since 2013. And Elon said, we'll be a little below that this year, most challenging year we've ever had, but probably above that next few years. So just stop and think about that for a second. A company that's growing at 50% or more a year, pretty much every year except for a pandemic year. So this is, to me, unstoppable innovation. A new tabless technology, cell-to-pack, bigger battery, simplifying the nickel manufacturing, new lithium mining, gigapress. This is all non-stop innovation. Heck, they're already on revision 4 of Maxwell's dry coating process machine. The machine that makes the machine is coming into its own.
Now, Tesla used to be cash limited. This is what Tesla looks like when cash is not an issue.
To me, this is an opportunity to buy more Tesla stock. Jesse and I are long on Tesla for a reason. If we're looking into the rearview mirror, who can possibly catch them at this point? And this leads me to another point about what Battery Day really was. This was a recruiting ad. Just like Neuralink Day was a recruiting ad for more qualified people for Neuralink, this Battery Day was essentially a big ad to the world's smart people, saying, want to be part of a company that is changing the world? Then we need you.
Right. This was essentially an accelerated college course in battery technology. I mean, I was not expecting them to say any of that stuff. I was expecting them to come out on stage with battery. Here's our new battery. It has all of these specs. And goodbye. I'm going to explain to you very complicated battery stuff. Oh, let's talk about the cathode. Let's talk about the anode. Analysts and people who are not used to hearing anode and cathode and manganese, their eyes were glazing over and they were going, what are they talking about? Why am I in school again? I don't want to, am I taking notes on this? Oh, this is why the stock dropped, because people don't really understand what was going on. This accelerated course in battery technology is exciting the engineers of the world and the smart people of the world to say, wow, I could actually go work for this company because half of that made sense to me.
Yeah, Tesla is no longer cash limited. They are just quality people limited. And so that brings us to chapter 3, which is the Osborne effect. And I think it's important to remind everyone what the Osborne effect is.
Right. We had an entire in-depth on the Osborne effect. You can go check it out right over here. We were mostly harping on Big Auto's hesitance towards telling people about electric cars because of the Osborne effect. Now, the Osborne effect gets its roots from a company that was going to release a computer in 1 year. And they said, here is what our computer is going to have. You can buy it next year. And the company went bankrupt because no one would buy their computer that was available this year. And so that became the Osborne effect.
I think what you saw at this presentation was Elon having to walk this fine line between telling you everything and if he told you too much, he would introduce the Osborne effect. Meaning, let's say that I'm Elon Musk and I come out and say, hey, in 2021, you're going to have this Model 3 with this range at this price.
Oh, wow. That's so exciting. I can wait for that. I can sit here, not buy a Model 3 at the current price, and wait till the price comes down. And that is the Osborne effect. Elon couldn't come out and say the results of what he was saying here. He was basically just giving you kind of a bunch of puzzle pieces, and if you're smart enough to put the puzzle pieces together, you can go like, oh, wow, I think that they might actually make a cheaper Model 3, or, oh, wow, if they really make this $25,000 car, what am I doing buying a Model 3 for almost any price?
Right. And so the whole presentation was this balancing act between basically telling you too much and not telling you enough. And I think that's one reason why Drew was on stage with him. If you noticed a few times throughout the presentation, Drew kind of stepped in and stopped Elon from talking.
Right. Or he would temper what Elon had just said. Oh, this will happen eventually, or we're not actually there yet, or stuff like that. That was just kind of lowering the expectations, lowering the excitement about certain things. And again, I think that this is why the market was kind of confused. They're like, I was expecting some big announcement, and you just told me a bunch of really exciting stuff, but nothing material that affects me today.
Right, because remember that Jesse and I talked about, we thought for sure at Battery Day they would have a physical thing, a physical battery. And they did. They have a physical battery. Now, I don't know why he didn't have it in his hand on stage. That would have been smart. But a lot of the things they talked about being able to do are going to take place 12 to 36 months from now. And I think as soon as analysts and the market heard that, their eyes glazed over and they're like, that's not next quarter.
Right. I can't trade on that right now.
Right.
I can't profit from that in 1 quarter. Because they're not thinking 3 years in advance.
I think the reason why this graphic is the most important in the deck is because it's actually hiding everything. If you read the top, it says stacking up the benefits, which means take each of those numbers and stack them. When I first heard this, I thought that it meant these are different ways of looking at the numbers. I thought, okay, you're increasing the range by 54%. You're dropping the price by 56%, but those are separate from each other. But if it's true that you can stack up these benefits, then what he's actually saying is you're going to get a compounded effect, but we can't come out and tell you what that is because it will scare off all the present buyers. So again, I want to point out, if you're on the fence right now about, thinking of getting a Model Y, and Battery Day comes out and you hear that there's going to be a way cheaper Model Y or a longer range Model Y coming out soon, you're probably going to wait. Tesla can't afford to have you wait. They're not a big enough company. They can't just be like, oh yeah, we'll just wait for people to buy stuff in 3 years.
I think they could almost wait with the amount of cash that they have in the bank.
Maybe.
But they do need that cash to start building out these production lines.
Right.
So you can't have it both ways. Okay, so this means that I could take 50% range increase, multiply it by 50% price reduction. Because let's say the 50% range increase, let's say I want to keep the same range. So now I need 50% less kilowatt hours. And then I multiply that by 50%, so I get a quarter. I'm paying a quarter, and then I don't know how this 69% factors in.
We have to remember this all applies to the battery pack, okay? And so not the entire price of the car. We were just talking about pretty much Battery Day here. Even though there were some improvements to casting of the car and stuff, we're mainly talking about the battery. So yes, this is big news. Being able to reduce the price of the battery is huge. Being able to increase its range is huge, but it doesn't mean the car is going to go from $35,000 down to $10,000. It means that we're going to get the price of the battery from something like $7,500 down to something like $3,200.
And that would be if you kept the same range.
Right.
But what they're talking about here with the range increase is both an efficiency increase of the car, probably by reduction of weight in the battery pack, but then also being able to fit more batteries in the car, which means that you're increasing the kilowatt hours of that car, but you're paying less per kilowatt hour for the additional kilowatt hours. So you could have, say the long range Model 3 with a range of 400 miles and roughly the same price.
I mean, this is basically why he was able to say that you can get a $25,000 Model 2 in 3 years, because of all of these efficiencies that they're going to come out with. So my conjecture here is that Elon's going to do something he's never done before. We're not talking about Elon time anymore here. I think he's actually reversed himself. Normally he tells you that something's going to come out in 2 years and it might take 3. I think what he did on Battery Day was tell you that it's going to take 3 and it's only going to take 2.
I think that Tesla stands a lot to gain by exceeding expectations. And one of the ways that you can do that is by just having expectations be a little bit lower.
Now, let's go to Chapter 4.
Wait, Chapter 4? There is no Chapter 4.
Well, I knew you wouldn't read the whole book if I told you how long it was. I'm adding a chapter in here.
All
and this
right.
is Chapter 4, Disappointments. And so basically, I was disappointed, I got to admit. When there was no talk of V2G, which is Vehicle to Grid, or VPP, which is Virtual Power Plant, I got kind of bummed, especially since the number 2 say.com retail investor question was about Vehicle to Grid.
Right.
And I thought that Elon's response that they, tried it with the original Roadster was kind of a lame answer. So I don't know if this is just they're not really ready to do this yet and they're pushing it off, or if he honestly isn't that interested in it.
I don't think that he is that interested in it yet. I think that we can, sit here and look at the potential of V2G without having to think of the implications of it. At this point, does it make sense to have V2G? Not really. We need more charging stations capable of bidirectional. We need more cars on the road, period. And we need a system in place to enable VPP. Tesla already has all that stuff for VPP. They have large grid scale batteries. They have solar on people's roofs and in-home batteries that can all be turned into a VPP. Then adding on the V2G after that isn't as hard.
Then the second thing that kind of bummed me out was that we didn't see a vehicle refresh. I mean, we heard about the new Plaid coming out next year, but there's no car on stage. There was no exterior or interior refresh pictures. And so I think it really would have helped the presentation if Franz had driven up on stage in a new Plaid and it had been refreshed, because then I think that's all people will be talking about right now. But that didn't happen.
Right. And I think that also when you're configuring your Plaid Model S, there's nothing in the configuration process that will excite you. Right. There's no real difference in the look. Even though the Model S that we saw on Nerdbring was kitted out with, body kits and spoilers and front spoilers and all sorts of crazy stuff on it, none of that seems to be on the page on the Tesla website. So there's nothing to really get too excited about. It's going to look the same, just have a little bit more performance and obviously cost a little bit more. I would have honestly liked to have them drive it up on stage, have a couple of differences in the car, and say that, we're going to be very quickly either doing an interior refresh or an exterior refresh, but just for Plaid.
And then lastly, I was bummed because I think the delay from March to September just gave us way too much time to inflate Battery Day in our minds. If Battery Day had come out in March, we wouldn't have had a chance to conjecture about anything. And If we had seen a big battery, that would have been enough to excite all of us. I think because there's been months and months of time to just be like, what else could it be? It just didn't meet up to our expectations. It's kind of like when you think for Christmas that you're going to get this awesome present and it's not as awesome.
Exactly. Or even if it's exactly what you wanted for Christmas, but you were just thinking about it for so long since March. You were thinking about like, oh, I'll get this for Christmas. I'm so excited. And then you get it and you're like, oh, I thought it was going to be better than this.
So I think the takeaway from this is that the innovation that we saw on Battery Day is mind-blowing. I mean, we couldn't even touch on all of it today. We're probably going to be unpacking this for weeks and months to come because there's so much in there. And I can't wait to get a hold of some of the stats on this new battery and on some of the machines making the battery. It's just going to be so amazing. Cool.
Yeah, and there are plenty of factories being built around the world that are probably going to have this tech in it. And we're going to have batteries going into Cybertrucks and semi-trucks and Roadsters and Model 2s. There is a lot of exciting stuff yet to come from Tesla. And I think another thing too is Model Y has been getting the short end of the stick, having been released during the pandemic. You can't go check out your friend's Model Y without wearing gloves and not getting inside of it or anything. I think that really put a damper on where Tesla could have been, because we could have all been enjoying Model Y. Oh, it's such a great car. Right now, we're like, I can't get near anyone's car. But I think Tesla's in a great position going forward. And I think that we're in a great position because the Tesla stock just dropped, so it's on sale now. And if Tesla can accomplish what they want to do in the next 3 years, there's no stopping them. There is absolutely, I don't think there's any competition at all because they have redefined what battery manufacturing is, and no one is going to be able to keep up with them.
It's a really good point. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us on this In Depth. We'll see you next week.
Now you know.